Guys, what's up? Today we're going to be talking about musket units. So, musket units, like the crossbows, are a direct fire unit, which means they don't have to arc or anything. They shoot, and it shoots straight. So your two heroic era ones are your Imperial arcs and your Kriegsrats. The playstyle between the Kriegsrats and Imperials are very different. So the Kriegsrats have very limited ammo supplies, so you want to try and use them around a supply point. The doctrines you want to have on them are the fire rate, the accuracy, and then the defense ones. Obviously, those are purple doctrines, so they're hard to get. So until you have those, just health and piercing defense and your damage doctrines. Piercing pen you can put on. I have it here just because I don't have anything else I can put on my Kriegs right now. But it doesn't really do anything. They already have so much armor pen, you're going to be able to shoot anything with heavily armored armor, I guess. I didn't word that very well. But you can pierce through anything, and it doesn't matter with guns. The Imperial arcs are very squishy, so they can't survive any melee combat. They'll just get deleted. So I actually wouldn't recommend putting the defense on unless it's piercing to try and counter archers. But they're not going to do anything against melees except just die. These guys have the volley fire. So you can either go top or bottom. I recommend going top just because you're going to use them in city and fort fights and T-Wars, and it's going to be a lot of shielded units. So being able to break that blocking status, and then with that doctrine, you'll be very effective against shield walls and shielded shock troops. And again, you're trying to play around your volley fire. The Tertios are the only Golden Era musket unit in this game. They're basically upgraded Kriegsrats, so they can survive in melee combat. They do pretty well, and their gunplay is insanely good. High rate of fire, high accuracy. The Janissaries for the Blue Gunners are pretty good because they're just something you're going to use in sieges. They're very accurate, but you have to be careful because you have to set them up with their sticks and they're stuck in place, so you're not mobile with them at all. These guys are sort of like the sniper rifles of the medieval era. So you set them up in the way back, you put on their stand, and you just let them shoot. The Domains I wouldn't recommend using. They're just not as powerful as the Janissaries. And yeah, they're just not as effective as the Janissaries. If you want a green musket, the Iron Caps are actually pretty good. I put a skin on mine so people think they're Tertios or some sort of Western one, so the psychological warfare benefit is pretty good. People don't think they're a green musket unit. I'd recommend going top. On the veterancy for the Iron Cap Arquebusiers and Janissaries, you go top as well. And basically, actually top for all muskets. Yeah. Top line for all muskets. Tertios, you can go bottom line and use them as more of a melee unit, but you don't see it a whole lot. It's still pretty effective, it's just underplayed. So let's go ahead and talk. Well, let's see some gameplay and talk about what you should be doing with these units. So we'll go ahead and do the Tertios, we'll do the Kriegs. And then we'll do the Iron Caps. So the Iron Caps, unlike other musket units, have 28. So they do have a lot of units, but they're not very accurate. Eastern muskets don't fire very well on their own. It'll take a while for them to shoot, like you see here. So I would recommend actually just using the volley fire. They'll shoot a lot faster. And if you have a cool Western skin, I would put that on just to make people think that they are something better and not your little green muskets. These guys aren't bad because they're 140 leadership and they do decent damage. They're just not as accurate. So you sort of have to play them a little bit closer to the melees. I would push up right behind in a push. They don't really do long range fire that well at all. So let's go ahead and talk about Kriegs now. So Kriegs, unlike the Eastern guns, have a snapshot like the Tertios, so they'll quickly aim and fire really well, like you see here. But again, their ammo supply is their biggest hindrance, so with the Kriegsrats, you have to play sort of close to a supply point like we see here. They're great for suppressive fire, and because of their bayonets, they can actually do pretty well in melee combat against low tier troops, so they'll survive if a green troop or a white troop comes up and tries to kill them pretty well, or a hero. But again, so they just killed that unit and they're already at half ammo. Their defenses are pretty good, so they'll survive melee and archer fire, both the Kriegs and the Tertios. The Tertios are chunky boys. They have very high health, very high defenses, and they're built for melee combat as well. So I can actually just V them here against this low tier troop and not worry about it at all. I would XV them because their AI targeting is a little wonky when there's a lot of enemies. So keep using that forward and formation. Press V. When there's a few left, you can just leave them on V. So the melee targeting with these guys is pretty bad. Units don't have to get very close to aggro their swords, which means, you know, a melee unit will be right about here, and 5 of these guys will start pulling out their swords and try to attack the guy. They are very bloodthirsty. But these are high tier gunners that are very good in suppression fire. So as we can see here, their rate of fire is really good. They're pretty accurate, and they do lots of damage. And their ammo supply isn't as big of a deal as it is with the Kriegsrats, so they have roughly double the amount of ammo. Again, something to keep in mind though when you're playing muskets is the weather. So if it's raining, your muskets won't be as effective. They won't fire as much. You'll still see the smoke from it, but it won't actually trigger a fire or a shot. So let's go ahead and start here with the Imperials. So I really like the Imperials in city fights. You can use the Tertios too there. The difference between these two though is you can't really be mobile with these because they're an Eastern musket unit. I'd recommend, if their volley is down, forcing them to shoot with your 1 key. Unlike archers or crossbows, muskets are a mid-tier ranged unit. So as you can see, the archers are eating them up because these are a lot squishier than you see out of the higher tier Western ones. So you really have to be careful with them. But the volley is mainly what you're looking for here. So once these... oh, it's more archers. Yeah, let's run it back. I'll go take care of these guys myself. Alright, hopefully we get a melee unit. Of course not. Alright, well anyway, I'll just show you guys the volley. So the volley is the 2 key, the 3 rank volley. It does a lot of DPS and a lot of damage. It's pretty accurate, and it doesn't just shoot straight. So don't be afraid if the unit's a little bit to the right or the left. They can shoot over here pretty effectively to the right and left of the unit, and their shots will be fairly accurate. Now they will keep shooting even though there's no unit there to shoot. So be aware of your ammo supply. Ammo isn't a deal with these guys. You have a lot for a few volleys, some assorted suppressive fire. So you don't really need to worry about playing around a supply point with these guys. But again, unlike the Western ones, they'll just die in melee combat. I mean, as you can see, they're getting swarmed and taking heavy damage. So let's move on to the Janissaries. Oh, another important thing to keep in mind is after their volley is done, they will not shoot for some reason. Their AI will just stand there. So make sure to V or use your one ability to force them to shoot after your Imperial volley is done. I don't know if it's a bug or not, but I've seen them standing there after that volley. So just keep that mechanic in mind with them. Here, let's not pull them out yet. Let's wait till I wipe these guys. There we go. So these are longer range in the fact that they can shoot at that max 60 range mark and they'll be really accurate with it, unlike some of their others. You have to use them with their stand and they can't move. They'll do damage and they are pretty accurate. They also have slug shots, which won't daze but will reduce their defenses a little bit, I believe. And they do high damage. But again, they're really weak in melee combat. So yeah, let's try and set them up again. There we go, that's a little better. So they're shooting at their max range right now and they're hitting their targets pretty effectively, depending on the formation. Unlike other muskets, you can't use elevation with these guys at all. And what I mean by that is they'll only be effective if they're shooting in a straight line. So you can't put these guys up on a wall, like up on that wall right there, and expect them to shoot very effectively down. It just won't work and won't happen. They have to be on the same elevation as the units they're fighting. So here's the domains. I actually put a skin on them so they look a little bit more like the Kriegsrats, a little more formal. These guys I don't find as effective as the Janissaries. Again, they're decent in suppressive fire, but having the long range ability with the sniper rifle, so to speak, Janissaries is really effective in sieges. So their AI targeting on the muskets is a little wonky. So if you shoot a prepared volley like this, they'll actually hit the units before they can start shooting them manually themselves. But again, keep an eye on your ammo. See, these guys definitely aren't as accurate as the Janissaries. If you want to play them a little closer, their suppressive fire isn't bad, but I prefer the playstyle of the Janissaries. And again, because it's a ranged unit and it doesn't have as much range as your archers, you kind of want to play them close to the melee units, right behind them if you can, and try to protect them so they can really do that DPS. I hope this helped you guys helped you guys learn the mechanics of muskets, how each individual ones operate, and what you should be going for. I would recommend rushing the Imperial Arquebusiers just because they're cheap and they're going to be a little bit more effective in territory wars other than their Kriegsrat's counterpart. So your options for territory wars when it comes to muskets are really going to be your Tertios or your Imperial Arcs. And because the Imperial Arcs are a gold or a heroic era unit, they're going to be a little bit cheaper and easier to rush, unlike the Tertios. And I put a cool skin on mine, so they look a little bit like formal muskets. I don't know. It's what I think of when I think of British riflemen a little bit. So that's pretty cool. Thanks for tuning in, guys.